It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Quite extraordinary.
Yes, that's what...
I'm hysterical. You never asked me, do I wear red? Go, pull, Sarah.
For 30 years, Johnny Carson reigned over late-night television, charming, sharp, and always in control. But control is fragile. Behind the laughter, The Tonight Show became a stage for power plays, ego, and moments that spiraled into infamy. Some guests did not just test Carson's patience, they shattered it.
What do you mean you're not in the mood? Show business is your life. What do you mean you're not? Somebody better phone the laundromat.
Aren't you getting a little old to wear Buster Brown outfits?
He faced movie stars, politicians, even provocateurs, and a few of them crossed lines no one else dared. Each encounter revealed something raw about the man behind the smile. These were not just awkward interviews, they were battles between charm and cruelty, humor and humiliation. Here are the 6 most evil guests Johnny Carson ever had, and the moments that made late-night history. Number 1. Charles Manson. Long after his crimes had shaken America, Charles Manson's name alone carried a dark magnetism. When Carson's producers considered bringing him on, it was not for entertainment, it was for understanding evil itself. But what arrived instead was madness in human form. A man who turned conversation into manipulation and charm into threat. Manson had become a cultural ghost, locked away, yet haunting every discussion about power, fame, and control. By the early 1980s, NBC executives saw the ratings potential of hosting one of the world's most infamous killers via remote feed. Johnny Carson, ever the craftsman of calm, agreed reluctantly. He believed that facing darkness could reveal truth. What followed instead was an encounter that left even him shaken. The interview began with polite distance, Carson's tone steady, his questions precise. Manson's responses were riddled with riddles, fragmented, evasive, and chillingly self-aware. "You all do the killing," he sneered at one point, turning the camera back on the viewers. Carson, usually unflappable, tried humor to soften the edge, but Manson mocked his control. He laughed at the applause signs, taunted the studio crew, and began to speak in riddles about mirrors and lies. After only 10 minutes, Carson signaled to cut the feed. According to crew reports, he muttered, "We gave evil a microphone." The tape was never broadcast. NBC quietly buried it, and Carson refused to mention it again publicly. Behind the scenes, his staff described him as distant for days, his usual quick wit dulled by what he had witnessed. For Carson, the Manson exchange became a reminder that television, for all its polish, could not sanitize everything. There were people who did not care about redemption, attention, or charm. They cared only about control. What Manson brought to The Tonight Show was not entertainment, it was the end of illusion. For the first time, Johnny Carson was not facing a guest. He was staring into a void that smiled back. Number 2. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed brought chaos wherever he went. On The Tonight Show, that chaos arrived drunk, defiant, and dangerously unpredictable. Carson's calm could not contain him. Reed's arrogance filled the stage like smoke. What began as small talk soon became a duel of dignity, one man fighting to keep control, the other determined to wreck it. Reed had a reputation that preceded him. The British actor, known for his volcanic presence in Oliver and The Three Musketeers, was as famous for his drinking as for his intensity. By the time he appeared on Carson's stage, he had become a paradox, brilliant on screen, disastrous off it. The producers wanted unpredictable charm. What they got was something far darker. The interview began with laughter. Carson asked about Reed's latest film, Castaway, and his notorious off-screen antics. Reed leaned back, glass in hand, slurring jokes and calling Carson Johnny Boy, as if they were drinking buddies. The audience chuckled until Reed interrupted a fellow guest mid-sentence with a lewd comment. The mood shifted instantly. "That's not charm, Oliver, that's trouble," Carson said evenly. The tension could be felt through the screen. When they returned from commercial, Carson's patience was thin, but intact. Reed kept talking over him, refusing to let the host regain control. The crew later recalled Carson's hand tapping his desk repeatedly, his quiet signal of restraint under pressure. After the show, he told his staff, "Never again." NBC edited the segment heavily before airing it. Gone were the slurred interruptions, the sneers, and the visible discomfort of everyone on set. But those who were there said it was unforgettable. The night charisma turned to menace in real time. For Carson, Reed's appearance was not just an embarrassment, it was a warning. Late-night television thrived on unpredictability, but only within boundaries. Reed did not just cross them, he demolished them. And for Johnny Carson, who had spent decades mastering composure, that was unforgivable. Number 3. Joan Rivers. No betrayal in late-night history cut deeper. Joan Rivers was not just another guest, she was Johnny Carson's chosen heir. Her humor mirrored his precision, her timing, his trust. But when she left for her own show without warning, that bond shattered. And what followed was not anger. It was silence, colder than any insult. Rivers had started as one of Carson's favorite discoveries. Her sharp wit and unflinching honesty fit perfectly within Carson's universe of polished control. He brought her on repeatedly, praised her in interviews, and eventually made her his regular guest host, an honor few ever received. Off camera, their rapport bordered on mentorship. Carson once told his staff, "She's the only one who gets my rhythm." But television was built on loyalty, and when Rivers accepted a deal with Fox to host a rival late-night show, she did not tell Carson first. He learned from the trades. "She didn't call me, not a word," Carson said quietly to a producer that night. For him, it was not a professional betrayal. It was personal. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Carson banned Rivers from The Tonight Show for life. He refused to discuss her publicly, even as journalists asked for comment. Rivers, meanwhile, defended her decision, but admitted later that the silence broke her heart. Her new show struggled, cancelled within a year. The failure cost her her confidence, and soon after her marriage. In the years that followed, she tried to reach out to Carson repeatedly. Phone calls went unanswered, letters were ignored. When Carson retired, Rivers said in an interview, "I'd give anything to have one more conversation." But that conversation never came. Their story became legend, not for its feud, but for its absence of resolution. Carson's silence became his verdict. For a man who believed trust was sacred, betrayal was not just a mistake, it was the end of a story. Number 4. Don Rickles. Don Rickles made cruelty an art form, and Johnny Carson loved him for it, until one night when the joke went too far. Rickles could turn affection into attack in a heartbeat. But this time, the laughter came with a crack in the friendship. For once, the king of late night was the punchline. Their chemistry had long been a spectacle of opposites, Carson's composure against Rickles' chaos. They thrived on teasing, on the thrill of seeing how far the insult could go before the bond broke. But one night in 1968, that balance faltered. While guest hosting The Tonight Show, Rickles filled the air with quick-fire jabs at his absent friend. Somewhere between the laughs, he knocked Carson's prized cigarette box off the desk, splintering it in front of the audience. When Carson returned and saw the broken box, he did not shrug it off. He walked straight across the studio into the neighboring set of Rickles' sitcom CPO Sharky, cameras rolling, holding the remains in his hand. "You broke my box, you hockey puck," Carson shouted. The crowd erupted, half in laughter, half in disbelief. For a man famed for his restraint, the outburst was electric. Rickles laughed it off. "Relax, Johnny, I was helping your ratings," he quipped with a grin. But behind the scenes, the laughter faded fast. Crew members recalled a heavy silence that followed the shoot. Carson avoided Rickles for weeks, his trust fractured. Eventually, producers arranged a televised reunion. The two exchanged barbs, the chemistry intact, but tempered by something unspoken. Carson smiled, but not as freely. To him, humor had always been about precision and respect. To Rickles, it was destruction disguised as charm. The moment lived on as one of late night's most replayed clashes, a reminder that even laughter has limits, and that sometimes the sharpest jokes cut too deep. Number 5. Truman Capote. Truman Capote arrived in a haze of genius and gin. He did not come to be interviewed, he came to dominate. Every question became an insult, every pause an opportunity for mockery. Carson had seen arrogance before, but never elegance wielded as a weapon. What unfolded that night was literature meeting live television and losing. By the late 1970s, Capote's fame had curdled into spectacle. Once celebrated for breakfast at Tiffany's and in cold blood, he now drifted between gossip columns and cocktail parties, more personality than writer. Carson, ever curious, invited him on hoping for insight, a conversation about art and fame. What he got instead was provocation. Halfway through the interview, Carson asked about Capote's rumored creative dry spell. Capote leaned forward, smiling faintly. "You're no Dick Cavett, darling." The studio froze. Carson's eyes did not move. Then came the counterpunch, calm and devastating. "And you're no sober man." The crowd's laughter burst through the tension, but the tone had shifted. Capote carried on, needling Carson with sly remarks and name-dropping old Hollywood friends. He dismissed questions, rewrote them mid-sentence, and turned the spotlight into a mirror. When Carson tried steering the talk toward literature, Capote scoffed, calling television a circus for people who couldn't make it anywhere else. Crew members said Carson's hands tightened around his cue cards, but his voice stayed even. After the show, Carson told a producer it was the longest 10 minutes of my life. NBC trimmed the worst exchanges before broadcast, but what aired still vibrated with discomfort. Capote had come for spectacle, not sincerity. For Carson, the moment reinforced a truth he had long suspected, that intelligence without kindness corrodes into cruelty. Capote's brilliance was undeniable, but that night, his wit became venom. It was a masterclass in self-destruction, played out under studio lights. Number 6. Frank Sinatra. When Frank Sinatra visited The Tonight Show, the air itself seemed to tighten. He was charm, swagger, and quiet menace all at once. Carson had interviewed presidents, legends, and rogues, but none who commanded fear so effortlessly. Behind Sinatra's grin was something unspoken, the understanding that in this studio, even Johnny played second. By the mid-1970s, Sinatra was more than a celebrity. He was an institution. The Rat Pack's last king, a man whose charisma could fill a room or freeze it. When Carson introduced him, the applause rolled like thunder. But beneath the polished smiles, the host sensed something different. Sinatra was not there for conversation. He was there to control it. Carson began gently, asking about Sinatra's tour. Sinatra replied with charm, but his tone carried an edge. When Carson teased him about his entourage, the singer's smile thinned. "Watch yourself, Johnny," Sinatra said, his voice calm but loaded. The audience laughed uncertainly. Carson smiled back, but his posture tightened, his authority subtly challenged. The conversation turned to loyalty. Sinatra leaned forward, his voice low. "I don't get angry," he said. "I just remember." It landed like a warning wrapped in poetry. The words hung in the air as Carson nodded slowly, shifting back to humor to ease the tension. But the control was gone. Sinatra now dictated the rhythm. After the show, Carson's staff recalled him unusually quiet, pacing backstage. "It's strange when the guest owns the room," he murmured. The broadcast was smooth, but the tension remained visible. Two masters sharing one spotlight, both unwilling to yield. Crew members later admitted the studio itself felt colder that night, as if Sinatra's presence had left a shadow that lingered even after he was gone. For Carson, it was one of the rare nights when charisma overpowered composure. Sinatra did not need to raise his voice. His presence did the work. That evening proved something unspoken about The Tonight Show. Every throne, even Carson's, had its limits. Johnny Carson's legacy was not built on laughter alone. It was built on control. For 3 decades he turned conversation into theater, balancing humor with authority and warmth with wit. But every so often, a guest would test those boundaries, revealing how easily charm could unravel when ego entered the room. Each of these encounters, whether with Manson's menace, Reed's defiance, Rivers' heartbreak, or Sinatra's power, exposed the man behind the mask. Carson rarely pushed back. He let restraint do the talking. That restraint became his armor, a quiet lesson in grace under pressure. In the end, The Tonight Show was not only about laughter, it was about humanity. Johnny Carson's real genius was composure, not comedy. Sometimes the greatest line is not spoken, it is the silence that follows. Which moment stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts and join us again for more untold stories from Hollywood's hidden past.